Okay, we're back, and it's COMP397 web game programming, and it's week 6, lesson 6, part 1. And what we're talking about now is I want to talk about the midterm tests that we're going to have next week a little bit, right, and what it's going to be on. We're going to be having a test. It's going to be, next week, there's no written component, so you don't have I'm not going to test you on like true and false multiple choice. This course is more hands-on than that kind of thing. And also, in order for me to test you on that kind of thing, I'd have to provide you with additional resources for you to be able to study. So, but what I am going to be testing you on is Create.js. So what you need to know is, I'm just going to pull up this for a second. You need to go to your Create.js library, easel.js at least, and understand at least how this framework functions. And what I mean by that is the stuff that we've been talking about. If I go to docs and if I go for easel.js, then getting started, like you should be able to use your boilerplate that we created together. You're going to have access to that. You'll have access to the internet, no problem, right? So you'll have access to the API documentation, right? You're going to have to build something small within the time frame, right? It's not going to be the whole class because we're going to do a little bit. It's a test. It's not a crazy thing that we're gonna do. So I'm probably going to give you about an hour or so, to take care of it all, right? At the end of the day, and then after the test is done, we're going to do other teaching because again, remember next week on Friday, your slot machine is going to be due, right? And I know for a fact, just based on what you're saying and just the stuff that you guys are saying, tests and everything else, that none of you have probably started your slot machine, which is a bad thing. It means you've waited a whole week for me to come to this point to talk about my slot machine again. It's due next week. This thing is not a one-day kind of deal, right? This is going to take some time to do, and it's worth quite a bit of marks, right? So to me, I think it's good for us to talk more about your slot machine next week. So we'll start off with the test next week, right? We'll start off at let's say bright and early at 8:30, right? So people who aren't here and they're late, right? Then you just have less time to do it, right? I will be cutting everything off at 9:30, so you'll have an hour to do your test, right? And then after your test is done, we'll start in with regular stuff, right? Because it's just a test. We're not going to do, crazy stuff like I said. So it's not going to be a big midterm exam that's going to take too long. At the most, what I might do is give you a little bit of extra time and, take half the time frame. So instead of, the whole 3 hours, you'll have about an hour and a half, and that'll cut you guys off, right? Why? Because it's not a big, complicated thing. What I'm testing you on is, do you know how to put together a few simple things with your, using the Create.js framework. So we're going to talk about that, right? Now, to prepare you for that, for next week, this week, I've got to talk about a couple of things so that you have, an understanding of how to do all that stuff. So again, next week you'll have access to the internet. You'll have access to look at the easel.js documentation and so on. All those kinds of things that we've talked about over and over again. Okay. There will be, in terms of using a computer and so on, there will be TypeScript involved. So you'll also have to know a little bit of TypeScript, right? So we've been talking about TypeScript since day one, right? Talking about from really week 1, we would talk TypeScript, and how it works and everything else. You guys should have a good understanding of that. And for that particular piece, you need to look at typescriptlang.org, right? And typescriptlang.org is a great starting place. It has all the documentation you need to learn TypeScript, and if you haven't done it yet, it's a good place to start. There's also tutorials there. You can also use the play area, which is almost like a little sandbox, to try and kind of put together an example script and what it's going to look like. Remember that person class, what it looks like on the JavaScript side. Here's the TypeScript side. So all those kind of things, you're going to be needing to know. So you need to know TypeScript. You need to know a little bit of JavaScript functionality. Again, it's very similar to what we've seen in other languages: C#, Java. in terms of our C-influenced syntax, those kinds of things. You need to understand those things, right? I may include things about modules. So how do we put modules together? How do I include additional modules with my index.html page? I kind of went over that last week at length, right? So please look at last week's videos, right, and review those so you know how to put modules together. It's a multi-stage process, right? We're going to do it again today, right? I'm not going to just like say, hey, you know, we did it one time, and that's okay. Let's, you know, forget about that and move on. We'll do it again, so you've seen it again and again, so you know what we're doing, why we're modularizing things. The primary reason for it is because our scripts get too long and too difficult to manage, number one. And the second reason is, number two, we want to kind of use object-oriented methodologies and create our own classes and objects in order for us to reuse code as opposed to you know, duplicate code over and over again. We want to reduce code duplication as much as possible. And there's ways of doing that. There's ways of reducing and reducing until we get a very efficient, beautiful code. But in order for us to get there, we have to build up that experience for you guys, and it takes practice. It takes practice for you guys to do that. So again, I would, for next week's test, like I said, study TypeScript. Take a look at last week's videos on modules. You need to know how to do that. Take a look at Create.js, Easel.js, that whole framework. The API, you need to know the basics of creating your boilerplate. And remember, the boilerplate, you'll have access to it, right? It's on GitHub. And if you look at, if you search under my GitHub link, and you look at COMP397 Create.js boilerplate, that's a great place to start. And chances are, I'm going to give you this to start with. So you're probably going to start with this boilerplate. I'm not going to say, hey, you don't have nothing. You can't start with anything. No, you'll have this boilerplate to start with. Now, it's a starter. That means you've got a bunch of stuff that's already included. But you're going to have to replace the things that you're going to have for next week's little test, right? So I'm going to give you this little boilerplate, and it includes, obviously, I don't want you to recreate things like how to create your boilerplate from scratch in terms of your scripts and your type definition libraries and all that stuff. We've already gone through that, so there's no point repeating, right? And it also includes things like your stats.js, like all the typings for easel and stats and tween. I'm going to give you this to start off with. So you're not going to start off with 0 for next week's test. You'll have stuff to start with. But just be prepared that there will be a module, kind of modularized approach to things. I will ask you to do something that's not exactly, you know, nothing that you haven't seen before. Like everything I'm talking about, you've seen, right? Today, we're going to do a little bit more in terms of our slot machine. And so again, 1.5 hours, I'm guessing, around 90 minutes for next week's test. The other 1.5 hours, we're going to do teaching stuff, right? So it's not like you're going to continue to do your test. I'll shut it down, right? So we'll do, you know, that's how we'll kind of put things together. Any questions around that? If I'm not wrong, it's at least 10 or 15, maybe 20 max, right? So, I don't believe it's going to be more than, it won't be more than that. Like, you know, it's probably worth the same as an assignment equivalent, right? And the reason for that is because I'm going to give you a bunch of little assignments. Your main, the big one is going to be your final project, right? Which I'm going to also talk about next week. I'm going to talk about a couple of things next week. Next week, I'm going to introduce assignment number 3. I'm going to give you that assignment, which is going to be due a couple weeks after, right? And then talk about your final project. That's why I need that extra an hour and a half at the end to talk about that. I can't give you the whole space for your test because you have a couple more things going on, and your final assignment or final project is worth 35%, right, for your final project. It's to be done with a partner or on your own, whatever you decide, right? It's got to be individual. It's got to be your work, right? It can't be something that you're taking from anywhere else, like, you know, and it's got to be your own code. I'm very good at this, kind of finding out when people aren't using their own code. Please don't use or steal anybody else's work. That would be bad, right, for you. And so, you know, then you have another piece that's about 10%. That's going to be for your presentation, right? So you do a final presentation with your partner about your work. So let's take a look at your game that you're making. This is for due week 14. So I've got to be able to give you that because we're very project based. Now, I might have an additional test sometime between week 7 and week 14 to give you another chance to, to kind of do more things with Create.js. And I got to test you a bunch of times, right? But so the first one, the kind of the midterm is going to be next week. And again, please be on time. Like this is, you guys wandered in late. I will start the test, and you'll only have an hour and a half. So, and not because I want to do that, because I have a time frame. I have other things to do, right, during that time, right? So, I mean, I'll try and give you guys as much leeway as possible, but I can't give you guys half an hour or something like that to come in, wander in when you feel like wandering in. I'll try and make an announcement again to remind everybody that the test is next week. I'll see if I can remember that. Yes. We will. Yeah, we're going to work a little bit on it, but you guys should be working on it on your own. Yeah.
Do we have to submit and upload the midterms?
Yes. Everything. There is no. I don't do paper. You know that, right? You should know that by now. I abhor paper. I think paper is waste. So we're going to do no paper. It'll be all, like I said, it'll be a practical test that you'll upload to your eCentennial.
So can you take down our eCentennial thing by the end of next week and then work just that project? Should I make another move?
Are you talking about your assignment 1?
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll talk about that today. Right? Talk about how you manage that. Okay, any other questions around next week's test, which again is I'm going to start off first thing when you guys come in next week at 8:30. So it's on Tuesday. Today's the 9th. That's the 16th. Yeah, no, next week the 16th. That's Tuesday, right? The 16th. We'll be doing it then. 16th at 8:30. I will run that test for an hour and a half, right? So it'll be like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then from the rest of the time, from 10 to 12:30, we'll talk about assignment number 3, which is the new one, and we'll also talk about your final project. And I also want to take a look at your slot machine, whatever you got next week at that time, so I can give you some feedback so you're on the right track. Otherwise, I know people traditionally, they have trouble with this one because this is the first time we're integrating code on the back end with graphics on the front end, and people don't know how to put all that together. They don't know how to connect. They don't know how to wire up the UI, the user interface, with the code on the back end. They don't know how to do that. So we'll have to talk about that. And we're going to do that today a little bit too. Any other questions around next week's test? How about assignment number 2? How are you guys doing with assignment number 2? Have you guys, any of you started? This is, what was that? There's no time. But there's time for other things.
Urgent.
Time, well, I can make it urgent, man. Oh, I can make this thing urgent. I can make it due Friday if you want. That'll be urgent. How about that? Right? I give you more time because, not because I want to make it so that you have trouble. I want to give you more time to make sure that you guys are better, right? And also have enough time to absorb the material, because sometimes I give you material, unless you try it with me. That's why you got to be hands-on when you're in the class. Okay, if you guys aren't hands-on here, when it comes to your tests next week, you're going to have problems because you only have an hour and a half. I'll shut you down next week. An hour and a half when it comes to 10 o'clock, there'll be nobody doing the test anymore, right? And that's how it's going to be. So in order for us to do that, for you to be speedy enough to figure things out, you need to practice. So please, when we're here in the class, don't just watch me, don't listen to me, don't just do the videos, do both. Do watching, do the videos, do everything, get your hands dirty, because you need to know this stuff, right? For us to carry on anyway. Okay. You will have to write code on the test. Yeah, you have to know the test. You have to know how to code your, you have to use Create.js, the library. Start knowing how to do that. So you definitely have to know how to do code. Absolutely. This course is not a bird course. It's a coding course. You need to know how to code. This is a game course. We're making games, but we need to know how to make games from scratch with TypeScript and with the tools that I've been giving you, right? So please, practice. And I'll give you some stuff to do today so we can try that out. Okay. Any other questions around that?